Daniel woke up like he did every day, alone in what was once their bedroom. Clara's side of the bed remained untouched, a silent monument to absence. It was as if the entire house had become a mausoleum, frozen in time, where every detail, every object, reminded her of her presence and at the same time, the cruel reality of her absence. The sun came in weakly through the windows, but Daniel no longer cared about the time or the seasons. All that was left were the memories. That morning, like every other morning, he passed the coffee and looked at the cup that Clara always used. It sat in the same place, on the top shelf of the kitchen cabinet, as if it was waiting for her to return at any moment to get it. But Clara would not return. Not now. Maybe never. It has been 3 years since the disappearance. 3 years of unanswered questions, sleepless nights and shattered hopes. He still remembered the day she disappeared as if it were yesterday. There were no fights, no dramatic goodbyes. She just went to work and never came back. The police carried out searches, interviews, everything that was expected in cases like this. But as time passed, interest waned. The investigation went cold, as did any possibility of answers. In the first few months, Daniel lived on the brink of madness, incessantly calling hospitals, police stations and even acquaintances he barely remembered having. Any clue, no matter how fragile, was a thread of hope that he clung to desperately. But nothing ever came of it. The world seemed to move on, while he remained trapped in the void left by Clara. He had stopped actively looking for her, not because of a lack of love or longing, but because emotional exhaustion overwhelmed him. The house, which had once been a home full of life, was now a prison of memories. Daniel spent his days in silence, dragging himself through the same routine, waiting. But he didn't know exactly what. That morning, however, something felt different. He stood up, feeling an inexplicable discomfort, as if something was about to change. She had decided to renovate the office, a space that Clara used to read and organize her things. Maybe paint the walls, move the furniture, maybe even get rid of some of her belongings. A symbolic gesture of leaving the past behind, or at least trying. When opening one of the shelves, Daniel took out an old book, one of those that Clara loved to collect. He ran his fingers over the worn cover, feeling the weight of nostalgia. But as he opened the book, something fell to the floor, sliding gently until it stopped at his feet. It was a yellowed piece of paper. He bent down, not paying much attention at first, until he saw his familiar handwriting. They were Clara's words. Daniel stood frozen for a few seconds, looking at the note in his hands. It was as if time around him had stopped. The paper, yellowed with age, trembled slightly between his fingers. Clara's delicate handwriting immediately transported him to the past, bringing with it an avalanche of memories. The notes she left in unexpected places, always with a loving phrase or a silly reminder of everyday life. But that note wasn't like the others. It didn't have the lightness of the messages of yesteryear. There was something dark in those words, a quiet urgency that he felt pulsing through the paper. Daniel read slowly, trying to absorb the meaning behind the short sentences. If you're reading this, it means the truth is about to be revealed. Forgive me for everything. His mind refused to immediately accept what he read. The truth? What truth? And the request for forgiveness. Forgiveness for what? Daniel's hands started to shake harder, and he had to sit down. The room around him seemed to slowly rotate as the words echoed in his head, reverberating cruelly. He read it again, several times, as if he could find some hidden detail, something he had missed. But the note remained the same, short, direct and mysterious. Clara knew he would find him one day. It was as if it had been planned with precision, as if she knew he would end up renovating the office and find that message at the right time. Daniel felt a knot form in his stomach. For 3 years, he lived in darkness, surrounded by questions that were never answered. Now there in his hands was the promise of an answer, but also a new flood of doubts. Clara wasn't the type of person to keep secrets, or at least that's what he believed. They had been happy, or so he thought. So why did those words seem charged with guilt and mystery? Chest tight, He looked at the note once again, with a single certainty in mind. He needed to know what was behind that message. Whatever truth Clara hid, Daniel was about to find it. And deep down, he feared that perhaps he wasn't prepared for what came next. Over the next few days, Daniel could barely think about anything else. The note was always in his hands, as if he believed that holding it longer would bring some additional revelation. But there was nothing else there. Just those few enigmatic words. He knew that, to understand the meaning behind the note, he would need to revisit Clara's past. Places he had neglected, people he stopped talking to after her disappearance. Maybe somehow they could give him clues to the truth. Seu primero destino foi a livraria onde Clara passava suas tardes. Ela adorava aquele lugar. Com seus corredores estreitos e o Cairo de livros antigos. Daniel mal havia passado lá desde que Clara desapareceu. Agora, ao entrar, foi imediatamente tomado pela sensação de nostalgia. A dona de livraria, uma mulher de maior idade chamada Beatriz. O reconheceu logo que ele entrou. Daniel? Ela perguntou, com uma mistura de surpresa e preocupação no olhar. Eu. Sinto muito pelo que aconteceu com Clara. Já faz tempo. Daniel nodded, feeling a familiar discomfort in his chest. Yes, it does. I'm trying to understand some things about her. Do you remember if Clara said anything in the last few months before leaving? Beatrice frowned, clearly trying to recall the memory. She was different in the last few months, you know? More reserved. There were days when she seemed distracted, anxious. I even asked her once if everything was okay, and she just told me that she had a lot on her mind. Beatrice's response didn't offer much more than Daniel already imagined, but it confirmed that something was really happening to Clara before her disappearance. However, it was not enough. He needed more. Before leaving, Daniel decided to take a look at the book section that Clara always frequented. There, among the novels she loved so much, he found a book that caught his attention. Inside it, a loose sheet of paper with handwritten notes. Clara's handwriting was unmistakable. The words were disjointed, fragments of thoughts that she never managed to organize. But one sentence in particular made Daniel's heart race. I'm drowning in something bigger than myself. There's no going back. This didn't seem to be just about work, nor something trivial. Daniel had the feeling that the truth was revealing itself, little by little. And with each clue, the image of Clara he knew began to crumble. While holding the sheet with Clara's notes, Daniel felt the weight of those words crushing him. I'm drowning in something bigger than me. There's no going back. The phrase echoed in his mind. What could be so serious, so overwhelming, that Clara had never shared with him? Daniel couldn't reconcile that image with the woman he knew. The woman who always seemed balanced, controlled, and who loved the simplicity of their afternoons together. He returned home with his heart racing. With each new clue, Clara's figure became more distant and mysterious. She, in fact, was involved in something he didn't know about. What previously seemed like an inexplicable disappearance was now beginning to look like a planned escape. But from what? While searching the office for other clues, Daniel found an old diary of Clara's, hidden in a drawer he rarely opened. He hesitated for a moment, feeling invasive, but he knew he needed to understand what was going through her head. As she flipped through the pages, a new Clara began to emerge. The first entries were normal, routine diaries, loose thoughts about work, the two of them, and plans for the future. However, as the months passed, the tone of the notes changed. Clara began to refer to a pressure, to something that consumed her inside, although she never specified what it was. An entry, dated a few weeks before the disappearance, caught his attention. I know he would never understand. If he did, Daniel would hate me forever. How can I tell him the truth without destroying him? Maybe it's better this way, if I disappear. Maybe it's the only way to keep him safe. Daniel's heart stopped for a second. Keep you safe? The anguish in her words was clear, but what was she so afraid of? What could be so dangerous that it would force her to disappear from your life? That note, the diary, the notes in the book. Everything seemed to point to something dark, something that Daniel never imagined Clara was facing. Emotional shock overwhelmed him as he realized that the woman he loved had lived a double life. carrying a secret he didn't even suspect. He needed to continue. Each clue pushed him closer to the truth, and at the same time, took him away from the Clara he knew. Still stunned by the revelations in Clara's diary, Daniel knew he couldn't stop there. The enigmatic words, the mention of danger and the need to protect him gnawed at him from the inside. Determined to understand what was really happening, he made a bold decision. Look for Helena, Clara's sister. During all those 3 years, Helena had rarely been involved in the searches. She seemed to prefer silence, accepting Clara's disappearance as a fait accompli, something Daniel never understood. Finding Helena was not difficult. They weren't as close anymore, but she still lived in the city, in a small apartment on the other side of town. Upon arriving there, Daniel knocked on the door, hoping that Helena would offer him some kind of clue or at least some comfort. When she opened the door and saw Daniel, her face turned pale. "You found something, didn't you?" she said, bluntly. Daniel nodded, still processing his own emotions. "I found a note. And her diary. Clara was hiding something big. Helena. And I need to know what it is." Helena sighed heavily, giving him space to enter. She seemed hesitant, as if she knew more than she was willing to admit. "Daniel, sometimes people keep secrets to protect the ones they love. Not everything needs to be dug up." "That's not enough for me," Daniel replied, his tone firmer than he intended. "I deserve to know what happened to her. If she did this to protect me, then I want to understand why it was so bad." Helena looked away, clearly struggling with her own emotions. After a long silence, she finally gave in. "Clara was involved in something dangerous. I don't know the details, but I know it was big. Bigger than any of us. She never told me exactly what it was. She just told me that if something happened to her, it would be to protect you. So, Daniel, I beg you, stop this search." But Daniel couldn't. Every word that came out of Helena's mouth pushed him further into the abyss of his own doubts. He needed to continue. There was no turning back now. Helena's words echoed in Daniel's mind as he returned home. If something were to happen to her, it would be to protect you. But protect from what? With each new clue, the shadow over Clara's past grew wider, and Daniel felt he was getting closer to a truth that perhaps he himself wasn't ready to face. Arriving home, he sat in the office, surrounded by the fragments of the life Clara had left behind. The note, the diary, the scattered notes. All the pieces were there, but the final fitting was still missing. He knew there was something more, something he hadn't yet discovered. Clara would not leave such an enigmatic note and a diary full of metaphors without leaving a final key to the truth. That was when he remembered an old letter that Clara had kept with great care. It was a dark-colored envelope with no return address. For years, he never thought much about it, believing it was just some detail. But now, every piece of paper, every detail of Clara's life, seemed to carry a hidden weight. He ran to one of the office drawers and found the envelope hidden behind a pile of old documents. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside, a handwritten letter, but with a very different tone from the previous note. The words were direct, without the cloak of mystery. "Daniel, if you're reading this, it means everything went wrong. I try to keep you away from this, I try to protect you in every way possible. But the things I did, the secrets I carried, they came to charge me. And now, I can't run anymore. For years, I worked for an organization that no one should know about. A clandestine, powerful network that controls much more than you imagine. You can't follow me. Don't try to find me. The only way to protect him is to disappear." Daniel felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. A clandestine organization? Clara was involved in something dangerous. A secret life he never imagined. The letter revealed the true reason for her disappearance. She was running from something deadly, something she believed would destroy him if he knew about it. He fell heavily into the chair, feeling the weight of the truth. Clara had sacrificed everything for him, even her own freedom. But the revelation only brought more questions. How could I continue without definitive answers? Daniel was faced with the most difficult choice of his life. The letter was still in his hands, but Daniel could barely breathe. Clara's words, so clear and so painful, echoed in his mind like a hammer, crushing any trace of hope he might have had. Don't try to find me. How could he accept this? How could he move forward knowing that Clara had disappeared to protect him from something so big, something he didn't even fully understand? Daniel's mind was in chaos. Every clue he found, every new revelation, only pushed him further into the abyss of doubt and uncertainty. He knew Clara had been involved in something dangerous, but he still felt he had the right to know more. To find all the pieces. Maybe even try to get her back. It was then that Marcelo, his longtime friend, unexpectedly appeared at his door. Daniel hadn't seen him in months, but there he was, as if he had sensed that Daniel needed someone. Marcelo had always been the practical type of person, someone who never let himself get caught up in emotions. "I heard you were digging into the past," said Marcelo, entering without waiting for an invitation. "I thought I was over it." Daniel looked at him, exhausted. "I found a letter from Clara. She was running from something. Something dangerous. And I don't know what to do now." Marcelo sighed, crossing his arms. "You're dealing with things you may never understand. The question is it worth it? Is it worth destroying what little peace you have for something that may never give you answers?" The question hung in the air, heavy. Daniel knew that Marcelo, in a way, was right. Continuing the search meant diving deeper into a bottomless hole, risking his own sanity. But at the same time, how could he just accept the loss and move on, knowing that Clara was out there, maybe still alive, maybe still fighting to protect him? "I don't know if I can stop now," Daniel said, almost in a whisper. "Not without knowing what really happened." Marcelo stared at him for a moment before getting up. "The choice is yours, Daniel. Just remember, some truths can be more devastating than silence." And then he was gone, leaving Daniel alone with his decision. A choice that could change everything. The house was silent. Clara's letter rested on the table, but Daniel was no longer holding it. He had spent hours there, standing still, staring into space, trying to understand what he should do. Doubt gnawed at his mind. Continue the search or accept the fate that Clara had chosen for them both? Deep down, Daniel knew the answer. As painful as it was, Clara had made her intentions clear. Disappearing was the only way to protect him. She had sacrificed herself, not just physically but emotionally, to ensure he remained safe. Her letter was a final farewell, and any attempt to find her could bring to the surface forces that Daniel didn't even understand. He closed his eyes and for a moment, allowed himself to remember the woman he knew, the Clara who filled his days with laughter, with simple gestures of affection. That Clara still lived in his memories, and perhaps it was better if it remained that way, intact, without the stain of what she had become in the last months of her secret life. Any new discovery would only bring more pain. That night, Daniel made his decision. He went to the bookshelf where he kept Clara's most valuable belongings. Books, photographs, small objects that she loved. Slowly, he placed the note, diary and letter inside a box. Keeping them was not forgetting, but it was the way he found to honor what Clara had done. He would not continue the search. Not out of cowardice, but out of respect for the sacrifice she made for him. The next morning, Daniel went for a walk. It was something he hadn't done in a long time. The cool morning air felt less heavy, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He walked to the park where they used to go, where they had made plans for the future that never came to fruition. There, sitting on a bench, he closed his eyes again and smiled, remembering the last time they were together. Some questions would never be answered, and he would learn to live with that. The truth, sometimes, was less important than the love he still felt for her. Clara was gone, but the legacy of her love, and the choice to protect him, would live with him forever. And now that you've discovered the secrets behind The Last Ticket, what would you do in Daniel's place? Would you risk everything in search of the truth, or would you accept the sacrifice of those you love? If you liked this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Share in the comments what you thought of Daniel's decision and what your path would be. Stay tuned, because in the next video, we'll explore another story full of twists and mysteries that will stir your emotions. Until then.